Good morning, you guys. I'm so excited to see you. How are you today?
Yeah, we're really
Good.
good.
Good. Yeah. How are you?
I'm well. For everybody who's going to be viewing this video, I'm so excited to share that I'm with the co-founders, the three founders, Alice Wilby, Sarah Arnold, and Belle Jacobs of Fashion Act Now. And we have lots to talk about today. I'm so excited to finally get the three of you in one Zoom screen.
It's taken a while, hasn't it? It's hard to pin us down.
I know you guys are doing such incredible work. So for everybody who's new to what you guys are doing, maybe you'd like to share a little bit about yourselves and what Fashion Act Now is. So Alice, would you like to start?
Sure. Yes. Hi, everybody. So my name is Alice Wilby, and I have been working in sustainable fashion for the last 10 years as a stylist and consultant and lecturer. And I've been working with XR for the last couple of years, and was sort of one of the people who created the fashion space in XR with these two wonderful women. And now we have set up Fashion Act Now, which I shall let Belle and Sarah introduce themselves, like tell everybody a bit about. Otherwise, I'll ramble on for ages.
That's okay. I'm used to that. For me too. No worries. We're all friends. Belle, what's going on? Tell us about you. Tell us about you.
Was that me, Patrick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a fashion editor for a mainstream newspaper in London for 13 years, and it really was. I mean, it was a fantastic job. I got to interview everyone: Kate Moss, Karl Lagerfeld, Khloe Kardashian. She said it to me. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I really don't want to repeat. She's a very, very nice girl, though. Don't get me wrong. She was really, really sweet. So it was a fantastic job in lots of ways. But I think even while I was there, I was pretty freaked out about just how much stuff was coming my way. I think as an editor, I was getting it felt like 1,000 emails a day, and I couldn't answer them all. And it's a huge amount of new product. And then, of course, Rana Plaza fell at the factory in Bangladesh, and I suddenly realized that everything needed to be relooked at. So since then, I've been focusing on sustainable fashion, and then Extinction Rebellion. I joined Extinction Rebellion in 2018 and joined the fashion team, and here we are now.
Amazing. And that editorial eye is so critical, and the media eye is so critical, because you're oftentimes telling the stories and putting the messaging out there. So we'll have to dive more deeply into that. Sarah, what about you? Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, actually my dog has just come up to try and say hello as well.
Great. Yes.
Yay!
Oh my gosh. Dude.
She's a scene stealer.
I want the same hairstyle. Can we work that out?
We'll have to open a poodle parlor for humans.
Yes, I'm all about it. Sarah, tell us about you.
Yes, me. So I am somebody who, my dream was to be a fashion designer, and I went to Central St. Martin's and did all that, and kind of came out of it thinking that I was going to have my own fashion brand. But at the same time, I was really concerned about the sustainability problem within the industry. And when I started thinking about having a brand, I was like, but then my job is to create more and more things to grow my business, and then it becomes a contradiction. So then I decided to retrain and study business, kind of came across the circular economy, which at the time wasn't being talked about as it is now, and realized that rental could be the kind of overarching business model that could change the incentives, so that we could be producing for longevity instead of obsolescence. So I then went on to starting my own fashion rental company called Hire Studio, and I did that for a few years. And then the IPCC, the 1.5 degree IPCC report came out that said essentially that we have 10 years before we might hit tipping points so that we get runaway climate change, a point of no return. And this was the point in which I thought, we can't just look at the fashion industry, we've got to have a wider perspective. And I was looking for things to get involved in, and came across an article saying that there was this movement that was about to launch called Extinction Rebellion. And I thought, this is it. This is finally people talking about this as an emergency, which I've been trying to do for years, but people just treat me as though like I'm a crazy person. And so that was 2 years ago. And, you know, we've created this fashion space within Extinction Rebellion and now Fashion Act Now.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And I have to say, the three of you are all good kinds of crazy. We need you guys. So I'm excited to dive in. So thank you. So let's actually dive in a little bit. So the roots for Fashion Act Now come from Extinction Rebellion. So maybe, Sarah, if you want to just chat about how that came about and bring us to where we're at now.
Yeah, so over the last 2 years, we've been telling the fashion industry and, you know, people in general to treat this as an emergency, and that, you know, considering the fashion industry has this huge cultural influence, it should be kind of, you know, expressing the times that we're in, and really what we have is something far from that. And so this was our message, and we had 2 main campaigns. One was called Boycott Fashion, which was asking people to not buy new clothing for a year. And the idea behind that was that we need to start talking about reduction. And so that was a kind of vehicle to do that, to start talking about those truths that nobody wanted to talk about. And then the other campaign we had was Cancel Fashion Week. So we did some kind of on the streets, direct action at London Fashion Week. And that was about saying, you know, we should really be convening for crisis talks right now. And, you know, 2 years down the line, we're in the COVID crisis. And during lockdown, we started having some difficult conversations about what should be happening, what we should be doing next, considering that we're still not making the progress we need to be making. So one of the things was, with these kind of really big asks that we had for the industry, we often got kind of dumbfounded people going, yeah, but what does the crisis response really mean? What should we actually be doing? And we said, well, you have to talk to the experts. That's not our job. And now that we're in, you know, we're coming to the end of 2020, we realize actually that has to be our job, because if we don't take that responsibility, others won't do either. So that is it. That's Fashion Act Now.
That's incredible. That is so incredible. I'm so inspired by that. And I've been watching all of your movements, and it's just amazing. And Alice, so from an educator's point of view, where do you think these steps need to start, where, you know, when we're talking about extending the life or redesigning fashion, or, you know, the kind of the laurels in which Fashion Act Now sits on from your point of view?
Good question. Yeah. So I think we've got, we need a massive culture shift within fashion. And we talk a lot within XR about systemic change, and that it's, you know, it's the wider systems that need radical overhaul. And within fashion, you know, we are still seeing an industry that is predicated on growth and trend and next, and like more consumption and more production, and you know, this continual model is literally killing the planet and disrupting people's lives. I mean, we've seen disruption this year with the COVID crisis, and we've seen you know, the sort of really horrific ways some brands have been behaving towards their workers. So it's just this entire kind of system is really flawed, and we need to transform it and move away from sort of the modes of production that we're in. But we kind of, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because you know, we've been talking for a long time. Like I've been working in the sustainable fashion space for 10 years, and when I started, I really felt incredibly hopeful that by designing things better and making things better and convincing people to essentially like consume in a better way, that we could transform the system. And we've seen massive transformations happen, but it's still not enough. And we are facing this like huge threat. I mean, I'm here campaigning for it, and I still can't quite get my head around the scale of the threat that is posed by the climate emergency. But you know, we know it's absolutely massive. So these little incremental tweaks, designing things slightly better when in one small area of the industry, when as a whole the entire industry is completely broken. It doesn't work. So we need really big system change. And
it's also not, I see the industry plays a massive part of it, but something that I work on a lot is the consumer behavior side. So, is this crisis, for lack of a better word, too difficult for people to subscribe to care about in terms of how they are interacting with fashion? And Belle, you might have some insight on that too, because you really work a lot with media communications and strategy, and as a journalist. So even if the system is perfect, does that mean that people are going to use it? I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I mean, I suppose if the system was perfect, all fashion would be well made. So,
Touché. Good point. Good point.
Yeah, we wouldn't really have to worry. I think it's too big a problem to lay at the feet of the consumer.
Yeah.
And I think also, if you look at the forces working on the consumer is regularly being told that it's okay to buy 16 pairs of jeans a year through marketing campaigns and through media. Like my job was essentially as a fashion editor to sell product on behalf of brands. A lot of the copy I wrote was designed to say, you need 6 of the best clutches for this season. Don't just get one, get them all. And so it was. If you look at that language, and if you look at how overconsumption is being normalized for the consumer, it's really difficult to blame them. On the other hand, I really do believe that they're waking up, and I do believe that the success of some companies such as Finisterre in Britain and Patagonia during lockdown is an indication of the fact people are starting to understand the impact of their purchases. I think people will also start to realize that if they truly care about people, planet and animals, which is the great triumvirate of our work, that they shouldn't consume products that damage those 3. So I do think there's movement. I don't think movement on behalf of consumers is enough. I think industry needs to get heavily involved. And I think in an ideal world, legislation would step in to do the wide changes that we need. It is a lot to take on for the ordinary person. It's very difficult to step up to someone enjoying their shop every week and go, what you're doing is damaging the planet. But on the other hand, part of what we do is to offer joy in the alternatives, that if you connect with your clothing, exactly. I mean,
I love that. Yeah,
exactly. The thing about the environmental movement is, or the climate emergency movement, or even our movement, is that the alternative that we're offering is potentially a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and you totally touched on it too. We need, fashion inspires joy. It inspires so many things. You communicate about who you are as a person, or the society or culture that you live in, or the things that you love. So we have to have that joy around it. And I'm so happy to hear that Fashion Act now is rooted in joy. That's so great.
We love clothes. Like we all love clothes. We all like take so much joy in getting dressed, and just like the transformative nature of fashion. It's so powerful. It's empowering. And like when I started out, I was all about this idea of empowerment dressing, so that when you're like dressing to empower yourself, power dressing, you can empower the people at the other end of the production line, and like all the way through the system too. And I really believe we can still do that. But we have to break out of this system of destruction that we're in. And like, I cannot emphasize that enough. Like the joy element, it's so important, isn't it? Because we kind of, there's so much pain and exhaustion in the world at the moment that we've got to come back to the joy. And part of what we want to do with this is something called dreamscaping, so that we're like, whilst we're doing working out all the really hard, difficult, painful stuff that people aren't going to like very much, the brands, we can also start sort of painting the picture of what the future looks like when we transform things for the better, because that's absolutely vital. We have to have those kind of like positive future narratives to bring people with us on this journey.
And also too, you guys are setting targets. That's such a great point, Alice. And you need joy to drive towards targets. Nobody wants to drive something to a place that they don't want to go, right? So bring joy around the target. So, I mean, everybody wants to go to a party. Sarah, what kind of party are we going to make around transforming fashion? I'm just kidding. You've got some really serious targets that you guys are going for. Can you guys tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's been so much progress from the fashion industry. You know, the Fashion Pact has signed up, what is it, like 30% of the industry to keep within targets of the Paris Agreement. The thing is, I think we need to, not to specifically talk about the Fashion Pact, but the whole industry seems to be, when they're signing up to targets, they tend to be these net 2050 targets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the UN said that to have a 50-50 chance of keeping below the 1.5 degrees of warming, we need a 45% decline in emissions by 2030 and to get to net zero by 2050.
Yep.
And that's all very well, that is science, but the problem is, do we want a 50-50 chance?
Right, exactly.
You know, if like somebody said, we've got a plane and there's a 50-50 chance it might crash. Do you want to get on it? I would say no way.
No.
So the thing is, we need more than a 50-50 chance. So the other issue is that these pathways rely on negative emissions technology. So they have also gambled our future on technology that it exists, but it's not currently scalable. So even though we would love that technology to work, again, we cannot rely on that technology to work. And then so if we're going to go for, let's say, a 66% chance of keeping within the 1.5 degree target, which I would say still, if somebody said, you know, a 66% chance the plane's not going to crash, I probably wouldn't get on it either.
No, yeah.
But
I need
if that's what we're going to work with, then the decline in emissions that we need to have is somewhere between 12 and 15%. But that's if we started at the beginning of the year. And so obviously we've kind of lost 2020. So it's going to be more than that.
Yeah.
So
how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? That's what I want to know. What's your
plan?
We need a crisis response, don't we? We need a really serious crisis response. And like Sarah's saying, like sort of 15% reduction in emissions. How do we do that? Part of it is stopping creating them, stopping creating things, slowing down, like degrowth. Like nobody likes that word. It's really terrifying. But we need to look at degrowth. We need to look at lots of other things that surround it and support it. Like how, you know, just transition for the workers. How do we protect? If we are going to slow down industry, for example, how do we protect the marginalized people, the people who are most at risk in this fashion supply chain? You know, like we've seen how the workers have been treated this year when the COVID crisis struck. So we need to have serious support systems in place in this industry. We're probably going to need to talk about reparations as well. Like, you know, we've got these huge billion-dollar global brands who have been extracting wealth, creating their wealth and extracting values from countries like Bangladesh for such a long time. And there's no infrastructure there to support the people. You know, the governments intentionally hold down labor laws and wages, and we know what happens there. So we need a really holistic support system, and this is like something that we really want to do, because every single time there's a sustainability conference, summit, round table to try and work out these problems, we come back to incremental changes, and the garment workers, the people, and are never at the table. The union reps are never at the table. We never have a proper representation. And the industry also can't talk about rubbish, like it can't talk about its waste problem very well. And, you know, that really needs to be addressed. So kind of quite radical thinking. But we've got to make this, so much of the work that we need to do, people are already doing. Like the three of us are really kind of like keen to say that we aren't the experts in this. We're experts in certain areas, but we want to convene all of the experts and get the right voices, get a real global representation, and get the right voices in the room, so it's not like a global north talking to global south situation. That is not what we want to create. We want ultimately equity for people and planet. So we have to have everybody at the table. But yeah, big changes.
Belle, let's go to you about maybe talking about the plan, maybe the next steps. Like what are what are those looking like immediately? Because I think what we've learned about this conversation is that you guys have created Fashion Act Now, which is an organization that is rooted in joy and inspiration, that has been developed to celebrate diversity and community, but then also use those celebrations to address challenges. And I think that is magnificent. So how do we take those first steps, and how are we going to support you? That's what we want.
It's a tricky one to answer, Patrick, for a couple of things. So I'll tell you, on paper and in reality, what we're hoping for is a series of consultations that draw together some of the people that we've been speaking about, some of the unexpected voices that we've been speaking about, to create roadmaps for change, which we will then present in a global summit. Now, I cannot emphasize enough how much work has been done in the industry. I mean, the industry is working its darndest, I have to say. And the more I understand about the efforts made, the more I applaud them, but they're being held up. They're being held up because they're stuck in this system that Alice talked about, which is they have to stay within a parameter that they understand of exponential growth. Let's take that. They have to produce a certain amount of clothing. They have to draw in a certain amount of profits. What happens if we created discussions that were freed of those limits of having to stay with the status quo, and that called the emergency for what it is? And I think, and I really believe, that the industry would try and move faster. And I really believe that, Patrick. I think, and that's not to put down what I genuinely believe that we made a letter to the industry with which we launched Fashion Act Now. And it was made up of quotes from people like Virgil Abloh, Alessandro Michel, Marc Jacobs, Paul Dillinger from Levi's. And each of these quotes made it perfectly clear that these designers knew exactly the urgency of the problem that we're facing. And yet, for some reason, the industry still cannot act quite fast enough. So we want to speed up that change.
Also, I love what you said about, I mean, for me, the visual that I got was just like a bunch of fashion industry executives clutching their pearls, like not really wanting to let go of the pearls, not understanding that there's a whole ocean and sea of sustainable pearls, like right over there. So I think what it's really valuable, really incredible about your organization, especially with the incredible catalyst teams and stakeholders that you have involved, you have such an incredible pool of people and communities who are doing such amazing work and building systems already to inspire. So using that to kind of show companies, brands, conglomerates that it's not necessarily about selling an item of clothing anymore, and opening their eyes to actually new ways of generating profits to keep those brands on those high street stores to benefit people and planet and animals is extremely, extremely exciting. Sarah, so there have been, what's the next steps for you in terms of how you get the key stakeholders involved in Fashion Act Now, so you can start to take some big steps? Because I feel like if you don't have those brands, companies, key stakeholders, and supporters, it's really just kind of like continuing to knock on a glass door or a door that nobody's ever going to answer. So what are your ideas and thoughts there?
Okay, I think we need to get the foundations right first. And that means, going back to what I was talking about before, is setting the targets. So firstly, it's not really about the fashion industry to begin with. It's convening climate scientists, convening people that are or representatives of people that are on the front lines of this crisis, and drawing this connection between the crisis that we have right now, the emergency that is going on right now, that is not just about numbers, but is about what those numbers mean to the people on the ground. Because then we get a sense of, if we choose a carbon budget, that carbon budget is essentially saying we're okay with this amount of people suffering or dying. So we need to get those foundations first. And then I think from that, we need to connect emotionally. And this is, we're rooted within the work with Extinction Rebellion that was all about doing this. You cannot take the right type of action until you create that emotional connection. And then I think that, you know, it's all going to flow from there, but we have to have that kind of very wide thinking first about the climate, the people, and then the economy, and then thinking about how the industry fits in with that, into that space. One thing that we have considered a lot is about the engagement with brands, because on one hand, obviously that's where a lot of the change happens. That's where a lot of the power in the industry is held. So they need to be on board, or the whole thing is useless. At the same time, if you have a lot of brands signing up for something, you potentially can get into an area where signing up is used for them to greenwash, and we didn't want that. So what we actually have really admired with the Pay Up campaign is that they've got a brand tracker which tracks the brands who hold the most amount of profits in the industry. So I think it's 20 brands that hold like 97% of profits in the industry. And then you've got all the brands that hold massive cultural influence in the industry. So we want to create a brand tracker, so a roadmap for change with much tighter targets, much more ambitious targets, and then we'll track how the brands are doing against that. And what we'd really like to see is that, and we're already seeing this, is that some brands will come forward and opt to be tracked, and this can hopefully be a way that, you know, they can show their customers that they are doing the right thing.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, this brings me to the question that is super exciting for me, is about how people can support. And I'm seeing this now in 3 different areas. So let's start with Alice and young designers and academia and institutional support. How can they, and what should they do to support? So let's start with you.
Get in contact with us, and let us know what your skill set is. I mean, this, like we said, we really want this to be a global approach. So this isn't just, you know, we're the 3 of us are all sitting in London at the moment, but this isn't a UK centric project. So please get in touch with us. There are so many ways that you could help and support, a lot of which I would imagine we might not have even thought of yet. So we are really open to new avenues and new perspectives about how we can communicate this story. But like Sarah was saying, we've got to build those foundations first. So if there's anybody who feels that they want to come and get involved in that stage as well, that would be brilliant. But we have got... we started this, part of this journey started with the Boycott Fashion campaign, and we've got this fantastic community on social media and this amazing following on Instagram. So there's going to be, come and join us there, have a conversation with us there, come and support us there. We are also crowdfunding for this, and so we would love some support with the crowdfunder. One of the reasons that we are crowdfunding is so we can keep this as independent as possible. Like we, again, back to the conversational, the sponsored spaces that fail are because the brands sponsor them and block any kind of radical change with the protection of their bottom line. this, but it's not. If you're not necessarily in the industry and in that space, you wouldn't really think about that. You'd think that it's really positive to be able to partner with X brand or Y brand and take some money from them, but that money comes with strings. So the crowdfunder is really essential to us. This is, again, just get in contact with us. If you're listening to this and you think that this is something that inspires you and you want to be involved, get in contact with us and we can have that conversation.
Well, let's set a goal, because I love students because they're so young and passionate and they're so open to so many new ideas, and everybody, whether you're a student that's my age or my mother's age, or I guess the idea of being a student and somebody who's ready to learn is the idea is that they're ready to take action. So I'd love to set a goal and see if we can get maybe 20 schools on board for you to help invigorate and support the efforts. And we can create fun projects with those schools and your catalyst and everything you're doing and help.
That would be amazing. Well, we've already got the Centre for Sustainable fashion on board. And so that's a really exciting space. But what's been so heartening to us is like how much of this movement has been driven by the youth and driven by the students. Like they're the generation that are really facing this kind of horror show ahead of them if we don't sort it out. So it's really important to hold that space for people.
Yeah. So,
hey, Ray.
Yes, of course. Okay, so over to you about how do people get involved? What can they do? And I would like to go where you want with the answer, but for you, I'd like to begin, if you can, with the media and the communication side and getting people like that onboarded. Are we looking at Condé Nast? Are we looking at Hearst? How do they get involved in your business of fashion? How do they get involved? Vogue.
You know what, Patrick, how do they get involved? They're getting involved already.
Great.
You know what I mean? I have a lot of hope there. Both Vogue Business and Business of Fashion are taking sustainability really seriously.
They are, for sure.
The language is changing. I have to say, though, that is in the fashion business media. So if you're talking about mainstream fashion,
yes,
sorry, Val, you're being on stage.
It's not happening so much.
Yeah.
so there we have a particular challenge, and I do think that has to be consumer driven. I think that has to be driven by the readers. I think the readers have to say what they want to see on the pages, and maybe they don't want to see endless trends that repeat themselves every 3 or 4 years. Maybe they want new ways of reconnecting with their clothing. I do think if enough readers wrote in and said, we need something more substantial or more fun or more in line with vintage clothing and secondhand clothing, and how can I upcycle and how can I share and how can I engage in a whole new way of thinking about the industry, and how can I challenge the brands that I don't think, if fashion media changes in that way, I think that'd be best. But there, I do think the push will come from the consumers and the readers.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it sounds like fashion and media brands should be coming to you to help create those stories and create strategy. I mean, I would.
Totally.
Right?
We're all this, I hate this kind of like labels and delineation between people. Like, we're all human beings on this planet. There is no planet B. Everybody's affected. A little bit of your wealth, if you have wealth, it might protect you a little bit. But as soon as this strikes, it's gone. So's your status. So clinging to these kind of like old identities and old ways of doing things are completely pointless. And I think part of that, we've got to stop calling each other consumers, and we've got to stop I like active citizen. Like, this is so back to like, how can people get involved? Talking, having these conversations and like opening up the narrative and speaking with your best mate who's like obsessed with buying from H&M, or having these like problematic conversations is really super helpful. So even if you kind of like feel you don't want to come and get involved directly in this, having those ripple out conversations is really super important.
Well, I love the idea too that's so important. I love the idea that you're talking about collaboration, and that's again rooted in spirit and joy, and saying let's work together. And from the magazine media side, I love the idea of the integration. And I think it was wonderful, for instance, when Vogue launched the first sustainability editor, Claire Press, who's one of your amazing catalysts who I just adore. And that, now almost every magazine has a sustainability editor, but is that enough? And what does that mean? And does it just occupy one page? So a full integration, I think, is where magazines, brands, media, TV, anybody should be coming to you, because you can make sustainability sexy, as I love to say.
It's sexy, but it's also about survival, isn't
Correct.
it? And that's
let's make survival sexy.
Patrick, that's the culture change we're talking about. That's the culture change.
Yeah.
It's like taking away one lens, which is about constantly acquiring, and putting another lens in, which is this wonderful lens that connects you to other people, to the planet, to nature, to animals, to how our clothes are made, to everything, to the genuine creativity that's in the fashion industry. And sometimes we don't talk about that enough, that these are really, really creative, sparky, intelligent, inspiring, innovative people. So maybe instead of getting them to churn out 20 million collections a year, we get them to focus their energies somewhere else in regenerative practices. I mean, it's tremendously exciting.
Yeah, and even making films and documentaries and collaborating with different, car brands, aviation, or think of new design ways to design everything that we touch and interact with. Sarah, over to you. The key stakeholders, the big companies, the big, the big whatever, the almost unthinkable, unreachable, untouchable, they need to be involved in well. Some of these big mega global companies that nobody even really knows are doing such great harm, but are contributing to it. How do they get involved? What are they going to do with Fashion Act now?
Ooh. Okay, firstly, I just want to say that my dog there's fireworks going off and she's just absolutely terrified. That's why she's skittering around and like, okay,
Awesome.
that's why she's doing
my God.
I'm not on a big chair, by the way. I'm not on a big chair. This is like a one-seater.
Oh my God. Maybe
so beautiful. Oh, she's such
maybe
an anxious.
Maybe she's got some ideas for some of these big
stakeholder holders. Hey, what are we going to do? They're going to ban fireworks.
Yeah, first ban fireworks. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, like obviously, the change we need has to be over the whole board. So the big question is, how do we bring the people that are doing the really mass damage on board? And I'm not going to pretend that we have all the answers, but I do think that there is a power in using this kind of brand tracker, methodology, and using activists on the ground. So, within Extinction Rebellion, there's now over 1,000 local groups in 72 countries. So it's a widespread network. And then also what we're trying to do with Fashion Act now is really, as you said, have this collaborative approach with different networks. The Remake have their kind of network of ambassadors that are doing amazing work as well. So I hope that we can bring that all together, and we do really see the power of using non-violent direct action, but it does need to be used in a targeted, productive way. So the hope is that with a brand tracker, it's not going to be optional to be on there. If we feel you need to be on there, then you're going to be on there. And we need to find the information to be able to track you, or we'll say this brand isn't giving information, and that doesn't look good. And then from there we can see where the gaps are, and we can hold the industry to account using a global network of activists.
I love that. And also it sounds like I can already think in my mind some amazing tools that are out there to be able to equip you guys with, so you can create your toolkit so when you're doing your consulting and you're doing your educating in a positive way. Like Source Map is one amazing one, which will get you connected to, which is the supply chain visualization tool that Timberland, VF brands, they're all working with it. Lablico, the company that I work with, which powers Swap Chain. So all of those so we need people to connect with you that have those tools, because you're right, transparency, tracking, I think those are amazing tools also, not to necessarily for call out culture, but you get inspired when you know, wow, that item has been swapped like 13 times. Like what we do with Swap Chain, for instance, the focus is about recirculating, and we gamify that. How can we recirculate this 15 times and then get rewarded for that? So that's what I think is also wonderful about what you're talking about, is the integration and collaboration with tools like that.
I think one thing to add is that, coming from the background of Extinction Rebellion, one of the principles that we really held to was no blaming and shaming, and we still hold that very closely. And we believe that we're going, as we're going into this crisis, then we as we're in this crisis situation, empathy is absolutely key. And so while we have this brand tracker, you can see it as a stick, but there's also carrots, and there's also a huge amount of empathy. And we're not going after people going like, why haven't you done this? It's more like, we've got a system that isn't working, and like we understand that everybody is in that system trying to exist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a roadmap and we need to try and keep to it. Otherwise, we're in big trouble.
Okay,
This
so
is like positive. It's really, it's all about positive solutions. I mean, these are what we need to present, as Sarah was saying, is this roadmap of positive solutions for positive change, to hold people and planet at the center of this work instead of profit. I mean, like, who doesn't want that? Who wouldn't rather be held at the center of something that's going to protect all life on Earth over being shafted by profit? Like, I know which one I'd rather take. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, you know, it is this systemic change, but we also, like, you know, back to that culture shift, there's loads of work that we need to do around like cognitive behavior and kind of like changing people's minds, and that again comes back to the joy, because it's, you know, so many people are like stuck in this system, aren't they, really miserable, just hooked on their phones, buying crap that they don't need just to get like a dopamine hit. Like, someone said to me the other day that like shopping's become a really cheap form of entertainment. People aren't even wearing the clothes, they just want to like put it in the basket and see it come to the door, and then it's complete bananas. That's not the behavior of a happy person. That's the behavior of someone who's like trapped in some weird dependent relationship with like an abusive shopping habit. Yeah. We need to set them free.
I'm seeing the new like Fashion Act Now commercial of all of us like running through a field, taking our and like, throwing them. Well, this has been a very freeing conversation, and I'm so excited. This is going to be the first of many conversations. I'm super excited because I'd love to invite the rest of everybody that's watching to come along with us on this journey so we can track the progress, which I think is really awesome.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you so much for joining me today, and we will definitely make sure that all those links and everything is out there. The three big takeaways from the last few moments were, if you're a student, you're in your academia, get in contact so we can collaborate, and let's use those the power of the students and the on the ground. Then let's the media that's already doing such an amazing job, let's get more connected to you, and let's get more stories and more creativity, more ingenuity involved. And then the key stakeholders, let's get them involved in the technology aspects, and not just dropping, as we say here in Minnesota, putting lipstick on a pig, but really coming in and doing the work with you. And then what's amazing about that is you guys have a circular platform there, right? So everything then feeds together. And the more work you do, the more beautiful it becomes. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. It's such an honor. I love it. So we will convene next time. All right, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. And